Alexis, thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Maggie.
You lead Planned Parenthood at one of the most crucial times for reproductive rights in probably American history.
Yes.
How do you balance an organization that has a national focus but also local affiliates?
Well, yeah, you're right. Planned Parenthood is a federation, right? We have 49 affiliates that cover all 50 states and a global operation as well. And what is great about that is that our infrastructure is our superpower. The fact that we are able to have a national voice and be part of the national conversation driving access to sexual and reproductive health care and freedom. We also are in community every day, being able to hear what's going on and understand how many of these bans are impacting people. So it allows us to actually gives us the credibility, obviously, to be in that conversation. But the resource question, how you divide and how you think about, in a moment post-Dobbs, what does it look like in banned states versus what does it look like in states where we're seeing a lot of surge is always a tricky balance.
How do you do that? Because we sit talking in New York, where I feel safer as a woman than I might feel in Texas. So are your conversations like New York is okay, let's devote our attention to Texas? Or I know you can't pick a favorite child, right, but how there are places where there is more need than others.
Yeah, and different need, right? And I think what's actually been really interesting is to see my colleagues in the Federation who live in blue states, live in states where there is access to abortion, really band together and start to think about kind of what are the ways that they can expand access, they can push access. That's why we're seeing so many of these really important kind of ballot initiatives, not just in banned states, but also in blue states, right? We have one right here in New York that will be an equality initiative on the ballot next year that we think could be the blueprint for the next Supreme Court case. Right, and I think that's actually what's exciting. And then in some of our states where abortion has been criminalized, we also have to think about what are the other fights that we need to be having there as well. While we are taking on that fight, of course, how do we expand access to contraception? How do we address, some of the maternal health care needs and the ways in which we actually divide resources in a more equitable way and ways that actually map onto the harm and the need that we have.
Talking about the criminalization of abortion in some states, I know that leads to a lot of questions on behalf of those who wish to either donate to an abortion fund or to Planned Parenthood, those who lead companies, who are negotiating travel policies and figuring out exactly what they can do to support their employees. How much time are you spending talking to lawyers? And I know you're not a lawyer, but what would your advice be to someone who's in Alabama or another state where there's a ban, who wants to donate, who wants to help?
Yeah, look, I mean, supporting organizations should be within your purview. And I think, obviously getting the legal guidance from the organization itself is really important. But support for abortion funds that actually offer practical support for people who need to travel and travel out of state, I think is something really important. And we believe the right to travel is a constitutional right. And so those are the fights that we are willing to kind of put bets on. In the same way, the ways in which states like California, their legislature is in conversations around a shield law, right? Which we hope to see in other states that could actually create more access, which would protect doctors and providers who are providing kind of telemedicine healthcare or other care in those states. Those are the kinds of things that I think we should be thinking about and not only engaging in resources, but also engaging obviously in the political process, because that is really, we got here by politics, we won't get out of here without politics.
You talk about the shield law, you talk about laws proposed.
Right to travel, yeah.
Everything that's happening right now. What specific races or laws are you watching now and in 2024? Are there certain things, again, I know you have to watch everything, but if you're someone who's watching this and wants to know, what should I be watching? Are there certain states, are there certain proposed ballot measures that everyone should really be paying attention to?
Look, I think we all need to be paying attention to Ohio right now, right? What we saw happen this summer when the opposition made it so hard for people who care about reproductive freedom to put a ballot issue on the ballot, they are now going to the polls in November, and it's going to be really important for us to be able to see kind of that, Ohio's a bellwether for so many other kinds of races. Watching the people show up for reproductive freedom is going to be a very important telling moment, and I think that is one to watch. Again, New York, the language around the Equality Amendment in New York, I think is really important. It protects pregnant people and the right to obviously control our bodily autonomy, along with other, a rights-based framework. Roe was actually not a rights-based framework, right? It was one that was predicated on privacy and burden and gestation. And I think if we really want to talk about what it means to be in the Constitution as full and equal citizens, we need to start testing that language as well.
I was going to ask, because on stage you mentioned codifying Roe or maybe doing something better. What does better look like, and how do we get there? Because we know Ruth Bader Ginsburg had criticized Roe precisely because of the legal basis on which it was decided.
Exactly.
So what's your prescription?
Well, I mean, look, I think that we know that abortion bans impact people, who are already facing a lot of discriminatory barriers in the healthcare system. Those people likely to be low income, Black, Brown, Indigenous communities, people who live in rural areas, trans communities, LGBTQ communities. So I think it's really important for us to understand that there are many people here, right, who will be able to travel out of state, whose children will be able to travel out of state. But we need to make sure that that restoring Roe, building that back better, is not only enshrining the right in federal legislation, but also considering the ways in which that support, right, the care is supported through funds and resources. The Hyde Amendment, I think, is one of the most racist laws that exist in this nation right now around limiting access to federal funds for abortion care, and that is that's impacting people who really have the hardest time gaining access as it is. And so I would say, not only enshrining the right, but building it back better and fighting around ways in which we see it supported in the way so much other healthcare is reimbursed through Medicare, through Medicaid in this country.
I want to ask something that's going to sound like a tangent, but among a lot of women's groups and women's spaces, there is a concern that contraception will be next on the chopping block. What do you say to those concerns?
First of all, it's not a tangent. It is directly related. We are already seeing contraception, emergency contraception, being attacked in many communities and many states, the kind of limitations that they are proposing and considering. We are also seeing IVF being criminalized through conversations that state lawmakers are having. And so again, our ability to determine when and if we will become parents, those decisions that we make every day, women make every day, typically around, is this the right time, right? Is this the right partner? Is this, how I'm, am I going to school? Am I going for that promotion? To have to consider, there's new data now that came out from All in This Together that talks about the fact that young women now, young women and men, are now more likely to delay pregnancy because they are worried that their pregnancies, they won't be able to get the help and the care that they need. And so we are seeing the attacks on contraception, we are seeing the attacks on IVF as well as abortion, and it is having some real life consequences on people's ability to plan their futures. And that's, I think, what we should be concerned about.
What's your message to the entrepreneurial community and the business community as a whole as we talk about all these threats? It's not just abortion procedures, it's IVF, it's contraception. What's your call to action to the Forbes audience?
Look, we know that sexual and reproductive health care is $1 trillion industry, right? And we know that women's health has traditionally been marginalized inside of healthcare broadly. So the gap between kind of what is possible and what we already know how to do inside of healthcare, I think the possibilities and the opportunities are endless. And we also know there's going to be a lot greater need because of these bans over the next few years. And so, I encourage investors not to shy away from this space, right? To support organizations like a Planned Parenthood, like our independent providers that are a critical part of the public health infrastructure, but also to innovate, right? To partner with us to drive new conversations around what those possibilities are, because we are reaching, a very sought after demographic that will have some very important critical needs. And that's always a great opportunity, I think, both to do well and do good at the same time.
Good note to end on. Alexis, thank you so much.
Thank you.